result until I hit on the idea of using subtitles as opposed to trying to make nice graphics in both languages. Why not keep the look of the English, and then for those who need the second language, there's the subtitle. And so all I have to do is, now I have all the text that I want translated in a file, and I had not taught it in Ukraine before, but I had taught it in Romania during the summer, so I just had my text file of things that I knew I wanted translated, had them numbered by slide, and so then I just copied it. They sent it back with the original text right below it, the Russian, and all I had to do was copy and paste into the placeholder that I already had for Romanian and Hungarian. So it was a slick way to do it. So that's one thing. If you do end up being in a situation where you're teaching in a place where there's more than one, where you need to be bilingual, you don't destroy your graphics that way, especially if you put much time into it. Okay. Now, the other thing is talking about text. Here I have a couple of things that I did. This subtitle is translated down here, or this title is translated as a subtitle here, and then in much smaller text, big enough to read, but it's not distracting because I wanted to get the top part in. Now, bringing in the Bible text. This is my personal style that I came up with. It's very fast and I find very effective and efficient. I never type in text, ever. I never copy and paste text. This is a window from Logos. And in Logos, you can break out a tab by itself. You can break out another tab and set it side by side. So the Ukrainians and people from around the Slavic world didn't need to see the English well, but I had it right in front of me, so I made it much smaller. I made this that you can see it from the back of the room in Russian. You have to kind of work with a little bit. And here's how I did it. How is it that I never type in or copy text? Well, if you open, this is Logos. If you, for example, the New King James Version, I'll duplicate that window. Then I, duplicate it, open in a floating window. So I opened that tab in a floating window. Then I go to, I'm not expecting you to remember all this, I'm just showing it can be done. Go to PowerPoint. If you look down here in PowerPoint, it shows you the relative size of the screen. So that screen is being shown at 110%. If I bring that down to 100%, then there's a one-to-one correspondence between, that's 100%. If you set this at 100%, there's a one-to-one correspondence between the size of this picture and the pixels on the screen. So what do? I bring my window from Logos. I set it at the size that I think will look right on the screen. This is just an example. And there are free programs out there that you can use to capture either the whole screen or the active window. I've got a free program that all I have to do to capture that window, that active window, is hit Alt Print Screen. I've captured the active window, and there it is. So I don't have to do any copying, pasting of the text itself. I can get rid of the table of contents, so I have just the text up there. I can, like I did in the example that I showed, here, have the English and the Russian sitting side by side. And again, you want to make sure that you set your slider to 100% so that you size your window in Logos, or whatever your Bible program is. Then find a free program to capture the active window, click on that active window, capture it, and just hit Control-V to paste, and you've got it. And then when you project, everything will be what you were expecting. Okay? Again, little tricks of the trade. Can you imagine how much time it saves me with a class like this that has literally hundreds of slides in it and hundreds of slides of text? If I had to, even copying and pasting is sometimes a pain, because behind, in every Bible program, there are unseen things going on that the programmer has used to format his text. And depending on how you copy it and how the program is set up, you may bring footnotes in with it, you may bring a bibliographic entry in with it, you may bring text numbers in with it. This way you set up your screen exactly the way you want it, you set it the size you want it, and all of them are always the same. Okay?
And if you didn't want that top stuff, could you crop that like a picture?
Yes, you can crop it. So if you're in PowerPoint, it is a picture. So if I crop it, then I can do anything with it. It's a picture just like anything else. Yeah. But I usually leave it because it carries the text reference with it. Although what I have had told to me sometimes, particularly in church situations, that sometimes it's hard to see the text reference from the back. So there have been certain presentations where I've actually, over here in an empty spot, put the text reference big enough to see. But it's an extra step, but in some cases it's worth doing. Again, just tricks of the trade, right? Some learned the easy way, some learned the hard way. Most learned the hard way. So there earlier I had the gospel in 25 seconds or less. Here, one of the tasks that we had in one of my classes, Charles Ryrie loved to give this one. Write out the gospel in 25 words. Can you do it? Well, the more complete your knowledge of anything, the more concisely you can say it. If it takes you lots of words to say things in complicated ways that should be relatively simple, that means you probably don't yet know the material as well as you should. That's why as a teacher you should be getting better, able to say more in less time, in fewer words, and using less complicated language. It was actually one of the things, is a benefit for me, going to Hungary and making the determination to teach in Hungarian. Both I and the other guy who we started the school together, both made the decision that when the school opens, it's going to be international, bilingual, and we're both going to be speaking in both English and Hungarian. And we both ended up doing the same thing, and that was we would say it in Hungarian first, then we would say it in English. And there was a very practical reason for that. I knew that if I said it in Hungarian that I could say it in English. I didn't always know that if I said it in English I could say it in Hungarian. And so what happened was, I think the process made me a better teacher, because it forced me to say just as complicated theological ideas in a language talking like a 4-year-old. And that's actually, I think, helped me over time. But anyway, this gives you another idea about something that you can do to make text visible. In one of my other slides, I took white and used it and made a transparency. Here, remember I said you never want your text competing with your background. So it's subtle, but there actually is a black transparent background that makes it just enough so that it's readable and it doesn't have a conflict going on there. You could, obviously there's no hard, fast rule whether it's 10% or 20%. Either would work. But the idea is you don't want your background and your foreground, your words especially, competing for attention. The PowerPoint eyedropper. Somebody asked me during the break, he said, I've got a version of PowerPoint and I don't have all these bells and whistles that you have. And I said, so my question was, well, which one do you have? And his answer was, well, it came with Office. And I said, yeah, but what year? He said, it's probably a couple of years old. I said, then you have everything I have. But you may not realize you have everything that I have. Let me, and the eyedropper might be one of those. So let me just show you what it is. But before I do that, let me show you something else that probably 90% of PowerPoint users don't realize. These are called ribbons. Everybody knows that. But if you'll notice right here, and it's going to be hard for you to see, but that says Essentials. That is a new section that I created on the ribbon. And if you go to the side of the ribbon and right-click, you will see Customize the ribbon. Click on that, and if you will see all these different commands, and if you change, this is just popular commands. If you change to all commands, there are thousands, literally thousands of commands in PowerPoint that you can add if you use certain things regularly. So one of the things that I use regularly is to center something in the screen this way and this way. Use it all the time. Those are not easily accessible from either a menu, and they're not accessible from a ribbon. So what did I do? I created my Essentials section of a ribbon, because you can't add anything to an existing section on a ribbon. That's another limitation of PowerPoint. So you have to create your own space. Call it whatever you want. For me, it was Essentials, and I just dragged it, or I just clicked them, put them over there, and then I had those things that I use all the time, always available. But again, a lot of people don't realize that such a thing even exists. All right. Now, let me give you an example. This gets into the nuts and bolts a little bit, but it will be helpful for you. If one of the more difficult things to do is if you're trying to match colors. Let's say you have a font here and you think, okay, do I want to go in and type in the number 253, 192, etc.? That's a big pain. Some brilliant developer at Microsoft decided, hey, let's make it easy, which is something that most developers at Microsoft don't do. So this is what happened. Let's say I'm going to, let's say I draw a particular shape. So I'm going to draw a square or a rectangle. Now let's say I specifically want that color right there. Okay. So I click on my shape, click on Shape Fill, and then you see a little thing called Eyedropper. And you've got it. So a little simple trick and you're not going to use it all the time, but when you need it, it saves you tons of time and work. Okay? That is a little thing that probably a lot of people don't realize that PowerPoint has. All right, we've been through 4 major sections. This is the last major section. I should be able to get through it. Otherwise, I'm violating the principle itself. Always keep it simple. And simplicity takes work. Simplicity takes work. It is not, keeping things simple is not always as simple as it seems. A fairly well-known designer, graphic designer, Nancy Duarte, said this: 90% of the creative process is destructive. So let's say you come up with a design that you think looks pretty good. Then look at it and say, what can I get rid of to make it look better? And then you walk away from it for a day and you come back and say, what can I take away from it? And then you do the really dangerous thing. You go ask your wife what you can get rid of and make this look better. Seriously. What can I do to make this look better? Less is usually more. The more you can communicate with pictures, the less you have to communicate with text. The less you communicate with text, the more people are listening to what you're saying rather than reading what you wrote. And hopefully what you're saying is what you're, the thing that you're trying to communicate. So remove things that you don't really need. Here's one basic rule of thumb, and as a teacher, sometimes you need to violate that. If you have bullet points without the bullets, that you want there's three aspects of Christ's nature, for example, that you want them to remember, and you want them to remember as a package. Okay, you may want to keep that together on one slide. You have one major idea, the nature of Christ, and then three subpoints. Okay, but in general, one big message per slide. One big message per slide. Now, again, thinking about the things that we've already talked about, think about the design process, the thinking that went into creating this slide. Well, first of all, I've got something pretty big, right? Secondly, I used a transparent, partially transparent gradient, dark gradient, to create an area for the message. There is green in the picture, so I used green in the text, but there's also gradient in the picture, so I used gradient in the text. So what it's doing is you're communicating multiple things at once. You're reinforcing your message. The more things you tie together, the more you're reinforcing your message. And a lot of it, I realize, psychology and all the stuff that goes into that. And I'm not into that in a big way, but you're trying to do things that are memorable. Now, if I were to say to you tomorrow, one big message per slide, what would immediately pop in your mind? This. Right? That's what a teacher wants to have happen. He remembers the things that he sees. One big message per slide. Not always possible, but let me give you an example. This is from a course that I teach on world religions. So I've used the text that looks like Hindi script to write out definitions. And then I have definitions of 5 different things. So Hinduism has lots of ideas in it. So Dharma, the path of the codes of Hindu conduct. Krishna, an incarnation of Vishnu in the Bhagavad Gita. Maya, a false or illusory reality. In other words, what is around us that we think is real, it's not. It's Maya. It's an illusion. Everything that you touch that you think is solid, it's not. Everything you perceive to be reality is an illusion. That's a Hindu concept. Meditation, focus, concentration, etc. All right, now, certainly as a teacher, this is one way to communicate this information. And you want your students to remember it. What would be a better way to accomplish the same thing using one idea per slide and using some of these other concepts? Again, you're trying to tie mnemonic devices together so people will remember things. So let's do it this way. Let's, rather than use full sentences like I did in the previous one, Dharma. I don't use a full sentence. I use a phrase. The path of proper conduct. That's not a full sentence. You don't need a full sentence. Why add words to the screen when all you care about is the concept? Secondly, you get the idea of what this means by seeing, okay, this is the way, one of the ways that Hindus act, the way that they behave. This is the path of proper conduct. See what I'm saying? Same thing happening, just spread it out over multiple slides and use pictures and phrases rather than full sentences. Krishna. This is a depiction of the incarnation of Krishna. Incarnation of Vishnu in the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the sacred texts of Hinduism. Maya, false or illusory reality. No need for a full sentence. And the thing is, you're going to be explaining them in full sentences anyway most of the time, right? We don't talk in phrases most of the time. We talk in full sentences. So there's no point in me putting on the screen everything I'm going to say, because they're either going to be reading or they're going to be listening. They're not going to be able to do both. And they will also have that picture in their mind. This is what I see, but this isn't reality. This is what I feel, but this isn't reality, according to Hinduism. Meditation. Focus concentration to experience the sacred. There you've got it. Samsara, Sanskrit for the reincarnation cycle. That you, depending on how you live your life, if you're a really good ant, you might come back as an anteater. If you're a really bad anteater, you might come back as an ant. Okay, let's see. Here's an example of using some combinations of things. Another thing that I frequently do with my text. I don't necessarily, the text that I put, the Bible text that I put on the screen, I generally don't want them or feel that they need to read all the text. But I wanted to keep all of my, one thing that you want to do, again for continuity, I want all of my text blocks to be the same size on every screen. So what do? I size the box. I never have to worry about it again. I get the size I want. I set the text size so it's going to be easily readable from the back of the room. And then again, this is a feature of Logos, I have assigned two hotkeys. My Y key is set to a light yellow highlighter, and my U key is set to red underline. And so I just highlight the text that I want to emphasize. I hit YU and my text is underlined. I hit Alt Print Screen, copy and paste it right onto my slide. So now they are focused on this. And one other thing, my main idea that I'm going to be talking about is not even the whole text, but this main concept out of the text. So I pull Judea and Samaria out, and because that's the main focus of what I'm going to be talking about when I'm on this particular slide. And that will change as I go from slide to slide. So you're constantly giving these visual clues that help them to spot things, because once they see that something is highlighted yellow and underlined, they know immediately. Every time a text box comes up, they immediately know that's where to look and what to read. So you're giving them as many visual clues as you can, and then if you want to emphasize something, then you can add these little bubbles or whatever. Okay, that was quick. There are actually 6. All right. Use of creative layouts. All right, the perennial question. The bane of all designers, of all pastors and teachers who have dozens of years of PowerPoints that they created on screens and monitors that were this size. And now all of our screens and monitors are this size. A couple of things generally happen. They say, I am not changing this no matter what. So they either have black bars on the sides, or they do the most unthinkable thing you can do, and that is stretch the whole thing. So it's like this. I know you've never seen that happen, but I have seen that happen. So actually there is some rhyme and reason to all of this. This is a 4:3 ratio. So all television sets up to what? To about 2006 or something like that. From the time they began, they were 4:3. That was a ratio, 4:3, and some combination of that. And that was called XGA. That was the designation. GA stands for graphics adapter. The X means that it has higher resolution than they used to have. There were this many pixels there. Now, most TVs, all the computers that I see out here right now, and this projector, project at 16:9. Now, if you do a little math, you can see that 4:3 is also 12:9. So they've actually just expanded it by, what, 30%, 33%. So this is the size we're using now. This is standard high definition, but now we have extra high definition and ultra high definition, and it keeps getting more and more and more. It takes a lot more work. I would suggest, personally, just from now on, always design at 16:9. That's the way everything is, the way it's going to be projected. And never stretch your pictures. If you stretch your pictures, then crop your pictures so that they look right. Don't have them pulled out this way and don't have them pulled this way. So generally, you don't have to worry about this anymore. When I first started doing this presentation, you did have to worry about this, because if you do go to the Dominican Republic, for example, or certain places, you're going to go to places that still only have this ratio. Fortunately, the graphics adapters are smart enough in today's computers that even if you're projecting here, it will automatically cut the top and bottom off so that it will still fit without stretching things. So it adapts on the fly to a projector that is a different size. Now, I had mentioned that years ago when we came off the mission field, we had lost a lot of our support. Back in those days, not everybody had the wider screen, the wider aspect ratio. So let me give you some examples of things that I created 2012, I guess, where people were in transition. So these are just some slides that I created, some business slides that I used to feed my family for a year. So these are all 4:3. Now you can see this was the title slide, and then this was a content slide. Now from a design perspective, I kept elements of the title slide at the top, and then added other elements. But again, as little information as possible. Did something for a moving company, the title slide, then one of the content slides. Again, elements of the title slide for continuity, colors, and different things. For a real estate company. Actually, both she and her husband had a real estate company, and this, just to give you something to think about, again, designing for an audience, designing for your audience. She had the average sale of her home was probably about half the cost of the homes that her husband was selling. So she was selling to a different market. Doesn't mean you're dumbing things down, it's just that you're trying to project a certain feel with the use of colors and things like that. So she was working in a different price range. So this is what I did for her. I actually created that. She wanted to have the names of her salespeople on there. I did do that in Photoshop. I created the board in Photoshop, and it took an insane amount of time, which is what happens when you have a combination of PTSD and OCD. Now, this was for her husband's business, again, a real estate business, same area of the country in Canada, but he was selling luxury homes. So I needed to project a little bit more expensive feel to his, for his business. So again, as you're moving from your title slide, keep your content slides in mind, and as much as you can do for continuity, try to do that. So you can see that there's continuity here. So I have, for example, I'm just trying to help you think through the thought process I went through. So have these, the title of his presentation that he did, this talk that he gave, was 7 Pillars of Successful Associations. Well, the natural thing to do is to design a slide with pillars on it, right? But I actually, you can't really tell because of the colors here, but I actually extended sort of a pillar down here so there's a shadow here. And without actually having the pillars on the following slides, that pillar extension actually is on the content slide. Here's something that was very simple. They wanted a very simple, clean design. And here's an example where they wanted the colors to pop. So these colors aren't those subtle colors. They wanted them to pop. Here's one now, the 16:9 ratio. There was a data management system. So again, used elements from the title slide and then used it as a slide bar. Now, a tricky thing, one little trick that I did here was, even though I'm working with 16:9, this section is still 4:3. So I used the extra width to keep continuity with the title slide. But the information is still in a 4:3 area. That's just what your screens are. Yes, yes. You can. If you go to design, then you say slide size. There you have 4:3 and then 16:9. But actually, where it says custom slideshow, it gives you even more options. If you want to make something higher resolution, then there are actually 2 different 16:9 resolutions that you'll see them when you go in there. Again, same thing. Use the extra width as a sidebar. This was for a flower company. Did arrangements for weddings and things like that. So this was her the title slide. But then what I did to keep continuity, watch what I did to keep well, that's not what I did. So this is the title slide. Then the first content slide. So I kept the title down here and used it along the bottom. But then Another thing that you want to do is if people aren't paying really close attention, they might miss when you switch slides. So sometimes you can do things that it's obvious that you've switched slides, even if they were looking down writing when you did it. And to do that, I flipped the slide. So now they know, oh, wait a minute, now we're at a new slide. All right, working with backgrounds. Let's see, I'm not sure I want to get into this. Well, again, you don't want your, I'll get into it a little bit. You don't want your backgrounds and your text to be fighting with each other for attention. So what I actually did was, each of these, I started out with a different picture. I made a black bar and used that to separate all the pictures so I didn't have to worry about sizing each one exactly right. And then, after I got it the way I wanted it, in order to create a background for the content slides, I took a screenshot of this. So that doesn't work well. See, it's in competition. But that does work. So what I did was, after I created the slide with all these pictures in the way I wanted them, I took a screenshot, I desaturated it a little bit, and I blurred it a little bit, and now, you know, it's obvious that it's the same picture back there, but now the background and the foreground are not competing with one another for attention. Again, just little tricks of the trade. Actually, that's probably, there's some other things that's actually, well, let's just go ahead and do this. We do have a few more minutes. Creating a slide background from a photo. This is going to get a little technical, but I'll just if you're thinking along these lines and you do work with the PowerPoint very much, you'll get it fairly quickly. That's actually a picture of the replica of the Temple of Jerusalem at the time of Christ at the Israel Museum. Okay. So here we have an example of using a sidebar. You've seen this slide before already. Using a sidebar. How did I get this background, which actually has white laying, a white, partially transparent background? How did I create that from this? Okay, this is where I started. So the first thing I did was I copied it. You can use Control D, which is the same as Control C plus Control V. Put it back in place. Then I cropped it and dragged it over to here. Then, now there are two pictures sitting there. You have the one that's cropped sitting here and the other one there. Then I drew a let's see, which way did I go on this? I drew a shape, drew a box the same size here, changed its color to white, increased the transparency. Whoops. Oh, I'm working on the shadow, not the fill. and then I just simply drag that off to the side. And now it gives you a place to put text. So, simple things you can do. In the last couple of minutes, map out the structure in your mind of where you're going with the PowerPoint. If you're doing a class, then you probably already got that mapped out anyway to some degree. Use big, clear signposts, and what I mean by that is ideas that repeat in your presentation. Use the same background, same font, same color like you saw in the God's Plan Through the Ages course, so people will know when you're at a new section or repeating something. So this is the structure of what we just went through. So each section has its own title. And so if you have that mapped out in your mind, you can see there's continuity between how I chose to create the titles for each of the slides. There's some continuity in terms of size and things like that. Other things, there wasn't as much continuity. But the main thing is to make sure you know where you're going with your presentation. And you will also find that once you get started in this process and you do it very often, you'll start coming up with creative ideas and things will start popping in your mind that you never thought of before. If I'm going to start teaching a new class that I've never taught before, the very first thing I do is go to Google and do a Google search, because somebody has taught either that course or one very similar to it, and there may be a dozen different designs out there, and I think, I'm not copying somebody else's design. I never copy somebody's design, but I think, oh, there's some elements of that look good. There's some elements of that look good. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than it is to be good. And you can find some really great things out there to kind of get the creative juices flowing. That's how I start all the time with the Google search. Okay. I guess we've got like 2 minutes left. I know we can't cover a lot with a lot of questions, but are there any last minute kind of questions that popped in your mind that we might be able to answer? I know we've covered a lot of material.
Are you for hire?
I am for hire, actually. I am.
One question, would you say for a neophyte like myself with PowerPoint, would it be worthwhile to take one of these college courses that has a PowerPoint, or to do it online on your own? They have like, 3-month course or whatever.
Yeah. That's really a good question. What I have found is that if I don't know how to do something, I just look for a YouTube video. Whether it's building something, installing a door, or creating a PowerPoint, or doing something, whatever it might be, somebody's put a video out there, and you'll probably find that it's a better use of your time just to kind of figure out things as you go. I'm not saying don't take a course, but probably most of them are fairly basic, and you're going to be learning a lot of things that you could pretty well figure out without a whole lot of work. Okay. Well, thanks for your kind attention. I appreciate it.